On May 1st, 1967, Priscilla walked down that aisle. We called it Elvis's May Day, and I was there. At about 4 in the morning, Elvis and Priscilla went to the Clark County Courthouse, where Elvis paid $15 for a marriage license. Then they drove to the Aladdin Hotel and retired, with the wedding set for early that same morning. There were only 14 people at the actual wedding, but a huge reception and press conference followed, and almost immediately the news was flashed around the world that Elvis Presley had been married. They were the picture of true love. Elvis was the happiest I'd seen him in a long, long time, and it was a dream come true for Priscilla. A 5-foot wedding cake and a massive diamond ring that Elvis's jeweler had flown in from Memphis, and attention like she'd never ever seen before. Michelle, Priscilla's younger sister, was her maid of honor. Mr. Presley was there, as were Priscilla's parents and family. They all flew back to Palm Springs. Elvis and Priscilla stayed there for a short honeymoon, then settling down to life in...
My parents moved back to the States, and when they wanted to come and visit, they would notify me and say, "We want to come by and see you."
We were living at that time in California. Sandy and I were living in the same house with Priscilla and Elvis.
Well, obviously I was staying with Elvis, and I told Charlie, I said, "Charlie, my parents are coming to see me, and I need your room." So that when my parents came, I'd say, "And this is my room," and they'd look around and they'd go, "Oh, it's really nice. Where does Elvis stay?" I go, "Oh, he's way back in the other room," and I'd look over and I'd say, "And this is Sandy's room," so it looked like it wasn't just me, the only girl staying at the house. Sometimes I wonder where my parents were, how naive they were, but they so wanted to believe that this was the way it was. Elvis's personality was very volatile. He could be anything, actually, at any time. He could be very moody. But one thing that literally stands out is his charm. He had a way of making you feel very special.
Elvis had a good rapport with everybody. I mean, the maids and, of course, all the guys that worked for him and the wives and the kids and whatever, he just handled everybody pretty much the way that it should have been, He just knew how to handle people.
Elvis rarely said he was sorry, very rarely. But he had ways of making things up to you. And his way of apologizing, was obviously giving gifts, but he would do little special things. Whether it be a look or a hug or bring you, have you come closer to him and saying really nice things. And it's something that you would kind of live off of. You always wanted that approval from him. When Elvis came into my life, they didn't know what to do with it. This was bigger than they could ever imagine.
He was so polite and so charming. I mean, it was just like everything was sir and ma'am and all that.
Just the way I was brought up, my surroundings, my mother and my father, and I'm proud of the way that I was brought up to believe and to treat people. I've always treated people just like I would like to be treated.
He was a good old Southern boy, and that was the attraction.
Well, he impressed me because he seems like a genuine person.
Now knowing Elvis, it all kind of fits in place, and why, I was a girl who spoke English. We had a lot in common. It's just funny how we kind of we had something in common other than rock and roll. So maybe he saw a bit of maturity in me and was drawn to that. He didn't know how he was going to be able to go, how he can go back to Graceland and what it was going to be like. It would never be the same without the presence of his mother there. He was reluctant in even going there.
He was mostly talking about being lonely and missing his mother, and that he wished he could be home with us, and that he was thinking back on the Christmas before when we were all together with his mother.
I feel very fortunate that I got to know him during that time. And I'm sure even before, the death of his mother, he was an entirely different Elvis then, because from stories that were told to me, he was happy-go-lucky, he was had a wonderful spirit of play, he was just on top of the world. So, I met him right after that had happened, and I saw a very sad Elvis, an Elvis who was very insecure and very unsure of where he was going to, where he was going to be when he got back. There's a Southern gentleman, who takes care of the woman, and that's it. And Elvis was very much that Southern gentleman. I mean, he believed in that. A woman had her place beside her man, supporting him and doing things for him and agreeing with him. Would always prepare myself before he came home and greet him at the door, all dressed and coiffed.
With a black beehive.
Yeah, and you looked at me and you said, "What in the world happened to you?" This is me now. This is me now. I'm your daughter, but I'm my own person.
He didn't want Priscilla walking around the house in a robe and pajamas. Anytime you've got 3 or 4 guys living in your house, it's not private.
Because we did have a good relationship. It was just that it had to be his relationship and pretty much adapted to his lifestyle. It was definitely 2 Elvises.
And that was what was great about him. He had every temptation that we all have. He just, in general, chose to be a nice guy.
And he came to the house and he was charming. He was wonderful, and my family had a lot of faith in him.
What was Elvis Presley like then?
He was insecure. He was, you could talk to him as a person. You knew who he was. You knew his fears. He had, God, he was so vulnerable. He was gentle. He was fun. He was a person you could really deal with.
Were you mad about him?
I was, but our relationship was very different. It was a very protective relationship from the very beginning. I don't know what it was about him, but he kind of took me under his arm and nourished me in many ways.
37 years ago.
37. It's hard to believe.
He would be 79.
I can't even fathom that number. I can't even fathom that.
Would he be working at 79?
I think he would. I think he would always sing. It was such a part of him.
Should we let her go? If we don't let her go, what's going to happen? She'll always accuse us of ruining her life.
We had to consider your feelings, too.
I said, "You're ruining my life," you know, and it made me think a little bit. And I said, "Please talk to Dad." He was calling a lot, and, you know, it had already been 2 years.
It was hard. It was hard to make a decision when you know that you really don't know what's going on.
There was these continuous calls, and I was very convincing to my parents and saying, "I'll take good care of her. Please let her come."
You sometimes think that this is it. You'll never find another one, you know.
Remember at that time, too, girls and boys were getting married at, say, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and God forbid that a girl should go as old as 25 and not be married.
So my parents let me come. I don't think they made a mistake. Who knows? I maybe wouldn't have been married and had the child I have.
Presley was in the Army that you two first met. Could you tell me how that happened and where it was and what the circumstances were?
Gee, it was, a month after I arrived in Wiesbaden, Germany. I was sitting in a snack bar. It wasn't really a snack bar. It was just a place where a lot of the people would used to go and have hamburgers and Cokes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And a gentleman came up to me and asked if I'd like to meet Elvis. And I thought he was kidding and said, "Sure, yeah. All right, now what?" And he says, "No, I'm really serious. I go to his house a lot, and would you like to go?" And I said, I still didn't believe him. And then it was another day that I was there, and he was also there. He said, I'm serious. I told him about you, and he'd like to meet you. It sounds very, offbeat, but that's exactly how it happened. And then I asked my parents. My parents were very leery, didn't think, had really checked him out to see if it was okay. And I went, and from that moment on, we started seeing each other.